Good evening, everyone, and welcome to episode number 50, a milestone for every day is a story all its own. Thank you. The audience continues to grow. I'm really excited about this. It is truly a passion of mine. I am a storyteller and a creative. I love Into the Outer Realms, which I haven't done in a while. Some of the other brands. Saturday Morning Storytime Live is going to make a return. A very good friend of mine who does books about a character named Mawson Bear has a new book out and he's sending it to me. So I believe in August, I'm going to get back into the Saturday Morning Storytime Live because I think when we left off, I had read about 105 books myself or Tanya when we first started doing that during the lockdown. But you're in for a real treat tonight. Some of you know, maybe many of you know, that I lived in West Virginia for 8 years. I still have a lot of close friends there. I still have a lot of ties there. And I met tonight's guest, I believe it was 2013 at the West Virginia Writers Conference. West Virginia Writers Group is an excellent group, and I was very honored. I think I presented 5 workshops over 2 years with them, and that's how I met tonight's guest. So last week, as you know, I did Fantasy 101. For you folks tonight, this will really be I'm sorry, I'm having some problems with my eyeglasses. There we go. Now they're right. So I apologize for that. And those of you who listen to this 3 weeks from now on ERT Radio, you don't have to deal with my crooked eyeglasses. So anyway, we met. That's a wonderful organization, West Virginia Writers. I was honored to be involved with them for many years. Last week, did Fantasy 101, an intro to that genre. Tonight, we are talking Westerns. I read this book. I wrote a review. Some of you may have read the review that I wrote, Destined to Ride Alone. Since I purchased it, I believe it won an award, so we will talk about that tonight. So now when you purchase it, it has a nice seal on it. RG Yoho is going to talk to us tonight. He is the real deal, folks. Listen to this bio. We're going to do things a little different tonight. I'm going to read the bio, and then I will run our short opening. RG Yoho, a native of West Virginia, has a passion for history, particularly tales of the American West. As a proud member of the West Virginia Writers of America and a 2022 Spur Award finalist, he's the author of the 5-book Kellen Malone Western series, and the 5th book just came out today. Beautiful timing, as well as various works of historical nonfiction and fiction. Yoho is recognized as America's foremost authority on the life of Baldwin Felts agent and infamous coal mine spy Charles E. Lively, whom he profiled in his biography, Charles E. Lively, the Deadliest Man in the West Virginia-Colorado Coal Mine Wars. That is on my to-be-read list, and I look forward to that. His diverse career includes roles as a speaker, a radio talk show host, and political columnist, in addition to being a retired laboratory tech and process operator in the chemicals industry. Furthermore, Yoho has served as the past president of West Virginia Writers, Inc. This is where the real deal comes in. He resides in Southeast Ohio, so as you know, I'm in Northeast Ohio, so we're not that far apart, close to the Ohio-West Virginia border, with his wife of 44 years. They have 3 children, a nephew who is like a son, who I believe was instrumental in this book being born. We'll talk about that. And 12 grandchildren. How wonderful is that? All who live within, furthest live 45 minutes away, which is wonderful. Growing up on a cattle farm, Yoho now raises registered Texas Longhorns alongside his son and grandsons. Like I said, truly the real deal. So let's just run the opening quick, bring RG on, and we're going to get going. All right, so please welcome to the show, RG Yoho. I feel like I should Yahoo or something, but I'm not going to do that. But welcome, my friend.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
All right, congratulations on the new book being published today. I mentioned how we met. Let's get right into. So you're born in West Virginia. West Virginia, you know, is the West in a lot of ways. But tell us a little bit about growing up on a cattle farm and how you got into Westerns, reading them, loving them, and then writing them.
Well, it's kind of an odd story. I mean, Dad moved us over. We moved over from West Virginia to Ohio, and he'd had a farm over there, and he also had one here. We had pretty big farm at one time, and at one point, Dad was running close to 100 head of polled Hereford cattle, and and we put up a lot of hay. I mean, I've thrown thousands of bales of hay over the years. We dropped a lot of sweat on that farm. Dad was also one other thing he kind of had in common with me is he worked in a chemical plant for many years too. Well, Dad carried a lunch bucket every day, like everybody else that works in a chemical plant. And I noticed he always had a Louis L'Amour book, paperback, in his lunch bucket. Well, back in those days, I didn't always want to be a writer. Back in those days, I used to kind of make fun of Dad for, I called him, there's he reading another dime store novel. And then, so one time I got a little smarter and maybe thought, you ought to read one time what it is you're criticizing. I did a lot of reading. I just didn't read that genre very much. And Dad had exposed us through films and television programs to a lot of Westerns. I mean, John Wayne was a regular in our house and at the drive-in. And so I decided to read one of these Westerns, and it just so happened I pulled out a Louis L'Amour book called Flint. And I read that book, and that, if you ask me what my favorite Western is of all time, it would be Flint. And that I was absolutely hooked on the genre and Louis L'Amour at that time. And it just shows you between me and my dad who really was the smart one in the family, the kid that made fun of him or the guy that knew what he was doing the whole time.
Right on. So being a voracious reader and reading about 80 books a year, I only came to Louis L'Amour about 3 years ago. Of course, I knew the name. I loved Westerns, loved the spaghetti Westerns, had read some Westerns. You turned me on to some really good ones last year. And I was in a little bookshop and they had a whole bunch, and Hondo and Flint were the first two I read. And I've read about 30 of them now. I just last night finished the 17-book Sackett series.
Oh, those are great. Now, they were readers' favorites, and of course, they were some of my favorites as well. The Sackett boys are pretty important. One of my sons, one of the Sacketts was named Logan, and one of my boys is named Trent or Logan. And there was actually a character in not in the Sackett series, but another Louis L'Amour book where there was a guy named Trent in those, and I have a son named Trent and a boy named Logan. So
that's awesome. So you go from reading Westerns and going, hey, I love these. These are good. My dad's a smart guy. When did you decide to pick up the pen and try to emulate?
It was probably about the early to mid 80s. Probably about the mid 80s. I got to thinking that Louis L'Amour's probably getting a mite old in the tooth, so maybe I wonder who's going to write books like that when he isn't around. And at one point I just said, wonder if I could write one of those. And I just said, sit down, try if I could. I think about the third manuscript I wrote, I actually got it published. And but that's a long story behind all that too. And but I really came around to it. I really love it. But I wouldn't have laughed at you when I was in high school and college if you suggested I was going to try to be a writer.
So, and this is really helpful, of course, to my audience, many of whom are in the business, and even more importantly, oftentimes for our purposes, those who are aspiring or just getting into it. So you had no formal training in writing?
No, I really didn't, and it probably hurt me somewhat. But I think at some point I started writing, and actually that just brings me up to that Destined to Write Alone. It kind of brings me there because at the Western Writers Convention, that was the first YA book that I ever decided to write, and I wasn't sure whether it was maybe too adult for the people it's being written for. My wife and I had some debate about it, and I went to convention, and there was a woman there named Jennifer Bonehoff that was an expert on it. She'd written been a WWA's Spur finalist in a couple, and I started asking her about it, and she said, "You want me to look at that?" And so I sent it off to her, and that was probably where my real formal writing training really got some real help. I had a great story there, but the suggestions and the criticism she gave me was just tremendous. And I think, honestly, I think I'll be a better writer from here forward just because of her tutelage.
That's wonderful. We all need mentors, and the fact that she took an interest in that, because so many writers don't want to. You just pray that someone's telling you, you're at a conference or
Yeah,
at the workshops that I teach, and they start telling you about their book in too much detail. Right? You've been there,
yeah.
and then I'd love for you to take a look at it. And what do you? I mean, that's a big commitment. So that was wonderful that she did that. I have kind of a selfish question. I've written a lot of plays for young people. I've worked with a ton of young people, taught young people. All my novels are for adults. Some of them are pretty dark.
Yeah.
What was the biggest adjustment that you had to make to write for that audience? Because I'm gearing up in 2027 to do my first YA novel.
Well, if a person had read my books and then read this one, probably the first thing you would notice that I wrote this one. This is really the first book I wrote in first person. I think most people that start trying to write, they write in first person. And the truth is, I did that a lot on my first manuscripts I wrote. And about all Louis L'Amour's books are written in first person. But I always thought it was easier. But then I found out, I started learning a little bit more about point of view and things such as that. And I realized that's a little difficult. And because writing in first person, you can only tell those things that you can see or have reason to know. And honestly, I wasn't sure I was a good enough writer to do it in first person. And that was the biggest change.
Wow. Pretty cool. Yeah, my very first novel that I wrote was in first person, but it made a lot of sense to do it, and none of the other ones are. Yeah, that was a good choice. So I'm going to just toot your horn a little bit here. As I was reading it, so folks, these are some notes that I have from my review that I did that you could read at New Mystics Reviews of this book, and also on Goodreads. But I happened to be reading that 17th Louis L'Amour Sackett book. I was also reading Comanche Moon. And okay. I know it kind of made your day, and rightfully so, but and I was, all three of you do the tropes so well. So folks, you know that I'm a huge fan of tropes. I have a t-shirt that says, you say trope like it's a bad thing. Trope is what we do in genre. It is those things that a writer. So if I go and pick up a Western from some author I never heard of before, I know what to expect. I have expectations, which makes it a little harder for the writer, especially when you have Louis L'Amour's and Larry McMurtry's and all in the business. But this is wonderful. If you know a young person, especially a young male, give them this book. Give it to them for their 17th birthday. Give it to them before they go off to college. It is a wonderful story about this 14-year-old orphan, gets on the orphan train, which is a real thing, goes out west. Nobody wants this kid, and he seems like a decent enough kid, and he's starting to worry, and the priest's starting to keep him down. And he let's just say the people that choose him, the man that chooses him, is not the nicest man on the planet. So RG, you had a great turn. I thought for sure is going one way, and suddenly something happens where everything changes in a blink of an eye. Was that always the plan?
No, not at all.
I had a feeling.
Probably the way you thought it was going to go was the way I planned to go. When I wrote up to that point and I knew what I was going to do, I don't know what made me change. I sometimes joke the characters won't do what I want them to do sometimes, and if that's true. The truth is, if you guys say, well, you can make your characters do anything you want to. Well, I heard Elmer Kelton say one time, if you can make them do anything you want them to, you better go look at your characters, because they're probably not what they should be. And I really planned to go somewhere with Mr. Bates, and that wasn't real nice. I mean, with maybe even the kid, and I don't know what made me change, but I think it made it, and that wasn't even advice I got from Jennifer there. I'd already had it kind of written that way, but I think the way I chose to go with it made it 10 times better story, and it was more happy accident than it was brilliant planning.
That's wonder. I talk so much about the dance between analytical, intuitive, that I write from an outline. But if your characters are strong, just like that quote you did, thank you so much for this. This is wonderful. All the people taking notes out there, all the young people and the beginning creatives. You have to trust your characters. They know better. Yeah, this would be a completely different conversation if it went a much more traditional direction. It was so rich. I love the idea, and I don't want to give too much away now, so I can't. Well, I'll say this: I love a good redemption arc.
Yes.
So I just applaud you. That was wonderful, folks. There's a lot of history in this. I'm portraying, of all things, Cyrus Avery, who is the father of the Mother Road, and it takes place in 1927. But I lecture about the Pony Express, and I did 2 weeks in Oklahoma, talked about the Pony Express, for as mythological and something that everybody knows about in this country. I think it only lasted for about 19 months.
Oh yeah, that's just about right. It was just about a year and a half, and it came and went. But it you would think, you'd ask the average person out there, they'd think it went for maybe 10, 20 years, and it just didn't. It didn't. It came and was gone almost as quickly, but it reached such a mythological an iconic status that people think it was longer than it was.
Yeah, I was stunned. It's amazing. It's the power. That's what I love about Westerns. There's religious metaphor. It's man against nature. It's man against himself. It's man versus Nan. So it's all those big topics. It's greed, and it's revenge, and it's redemption, and you do it so well. I'm just so happy to know you and be able to speak with you tonight. He meets so his life changes. He makes the most of it. He's brave. He's learned a lot. He's grown up very, very fast. And I think that this book will super appeal to teenage boys who've been in a position where they had to grow up, become the man of the house, have something very tragic happening to them. I was just thinking, wow, like every young man should read this and go, okay, if you make a right instead of a left here, if you just stop and breathe, if you have a little faith and trust, it's going to be okay. I mean, it might not be easy, but it's going to be okay. So that was great. So he meets Wild Bill Hickok, who was a stockman. I also learned that. He was not a rider, but he was a stockman. And you also pull in, because I really don't want to give a lot away, you also pull in the Pinkerton Detective Agency. Was that the first time you used them?
No. They appear quite often in my Kel Malone series.
Okay, so that's going to be a good. Let's see here. So let's move on to some of your other works. To set this all up, I love this quote, and I've quoted to you 2 or 3 times now, but you wrote this to me in your talking points. I'm going to share it with the audience. I write books I like to read. Who are some of your favorite Western authors?
Well, Louis L'Amour, of course. His name slips me right now, but the writer of True Grit is just right up there.
Preston Sturgis.
Yeah,
I love that book. Yeah,
Larry McMurtry and just those ones. Zane Grey wasn't one of them. I've only read 2 books by him, and I didn't really care that much for him for some reason. And
He's
I never
Riders of the Purple Sage.
Yes, I read one book. I forget the name of it, and then I didn't like it very much. And I thought, everybody rants about Riders of the Purple Sage, and so I thought, before you abandon Zane Grey, you better read that. Well, I read it, and there's a horse chase in there that I think they'd have killed a dozen horses in that horse chase, and I just never could quite embrace Zane Grey.
I agree with you, and I started circling every time he says purple sage, and there are hundreds of circles in my book. It got
I'll
a
tell you
little
what,
tiresome.
the first book I read of his, he used the term the short version of partner, and he said pard in that book, and it must have been a few thousand times. And if you'd set up some kind of drinking game where you took a shot every time he said pard, you'd be laying underneath the desk in no time.
That's funny. That's interesting that we both agree on that. So, what other genres do you read?
I am a big fan of Robert V. Parker, and now he wrote some westerns, but Robert V. Parker, I'm really a huge fan of his Spencer series and Jesse Stone, where the films and movies were made from. Now he later did a couple westerns, but I think Robert B. Parker actually wrote a good book of fiction involving Jackie Robinson, and I just love Robert B. Parker, and his book has a lot of influence on some of the characters that appear in my Kellen Malone series.
Neat. Okay, and we are going to get to that, I promise. So here's the quote, folks, that I love. As a Western author, my books aren't eat, pray, love. They tend to be more ride, shoot, shove. I love that.
I like rhyming. I even occasionally try to dabble my hands in trying to write poetry. I'm not a good one, but I've actually written a couple lyrics, a couple songs. One of them's been published, so it's kind of cool.
Oh, neat. Congratulations. So let's I'm gonna switch things around on my notes here a little. You've teased out the Kellen Malone series. So was Kellen Malone the first book you wrote that got published?
No, it wasn't. It was Long Ride Yesterday was the first book I got published, and the truth is, it was probably the third manuscript I did, and Death Comes to Red Hawk, the first book in the Kellen Malone series, would probably be my fourth manuscript.
Okay. So tell us a little about Kellen and why this is a character that you go back to time and time again.
Well, when I first wrote that book, and there's a part in that Death Comes to Red Hawk. I'd written this Kellen Malone book as a standalone book. I never planned to do any more, and it just about like every other book I wrote, I just pretty well decided it's going to be standalone, and so I didn't have any luck getting anything published. And be honest with you, I was still writing, I was still being published in newspapers and stuff, but I pretty well through my books. I wrote that when my daughter was about 2 or 3 years old. And I pretty much threw my manuscripts in the drawer and just kind of, and I still kicked myself in the behind for it. But I didn't drag them out and try to get them published again until she was about 19 when I got it published. And she didn't know I'd ever written a Western. So that tells you what happened. Now I just bang myself in behind every day for that, because I'd have a lot of manuscripts that I could turn into books a lot quicker now if I'd stayed with it. But you live and learn. You make dumb mistakes. You try not to repeat them. But Kellen Malone was just one of them. In that book, that first book, there's a scene in there that was written about 19 years later and was incorporated into the book. And there's actually many years, and maybe it doesn't show in the book, but between the first book and the second book, Death Rides the Rail and Death Comes to Red Hawk, there's many years between the writing of those two books, probably about 19 years.
Wow. So what made you, we'll talk about some of the others, the standalones too. What made you go back to Kellen? Did Kellen make you do it?
Well, when I got back into it, I decided I was going to write another book again, but I didn't. Probably I couldn't come up with anything right then. And I thought, I like this character. I kind of got to reviewing it again. I thought, this would be a good one to write a second one out of. And that's how it went. And so none of them were really, once I wrote the second one, I had ideas about another one. But a person could grab any of my books in that Kel Malone series and read them as a standalone book, and he'd be all right. Might be a few things he'd scratch his head about, and but I don't like this thing of people writing sequels where you have to buy all the books or you don't even know what happened. I don't think that much of that, and I don't think it's very fair to your customers.
Interesting. Okay. As a guy who writes those long series, I'll think about that. I review tons and tons of books, and when I review series, I always look for the callbacks. So which is
Yeah.
really key is to go, "Oh, okay, so I wouldn't have had to have read that book." And some series they've sent me the second or third book and I've done pretty okay because of those
Yeah.
callbacks. So yeah, there is a way around it. So I think of Hondo, I think of Flint, I think of these great Rooster Cogburn, I think of these great iconic The Man with No Name. Tell us a little bit about Kellen Malone.
Kellen Malone was a guy, and this goes in the old tropes too. He was convicted of a crime he didn't commit, sent to Yuma prison. While he was going away in Yuma prison, he lost his wife, his ranch, and about everything else. And I won't reveal much more than that, but is not only did he lose his wife, she died, and so when he comes, pretty much when he gets out of Yuma prison, he's looking for a lot of payback, and that's kind of the man he is. There isn't there one guy. There's another character that appears in there later that was there to kill him, and I won't go into that too much, but Kel Malone was a guy that was just eat up with hatred and wanted vengeance, and that's kind of how the book starts. Like a lot of good Western tropes start, a book of revenge and getting even, and there's some things that happen from there.
Right. So I would say I'm thinking fans of Unforgiven, fans of The Outlaw, Josie Wales. Kellen's first book would appeal to them.
Yeah, yeah, he's a man that pretty has a pretty clear view of right and wrong. He's a part-time lawman, and he pretty well stays on the side of the law most of the time, which makes it interesting with a character that'll appear later in that book and the changes that happen with that person over time. But Kellen Malone is just he'd be like your white knight. I mean, that's the kind of person he is. He's just a good guy. He has moments where he wants to cross over the line, but he rarely does.
Nice. I gotta put that on my list too. I don't know if it's because I'm an actor and because I come from the theater and from film. In my novels, I cast all of my characters. Do you do that?
I kind of do. The Yeah, I kind of do that. And when I write, I'm writing down what I see playing out in my mind. I'm almost like I'm recording a film, and Honda was a novelization of the movie, and it was actually written from the movie itself. Uh, and I kind of feel like I'm doing that. I almost, when I'm really at my best, I can see that thing happening, and I'm just writing down what I see going on. My blood pressure will rise, and I'll get excited, and probably my heart rate's up, and I'm just writing what I see, and when I'm having moments like that, I love writing like that. I've got an old keyboard. I always kind of like the old electric typewriters that had the big click on not the old Royal typewriters from old days, but the electronic ones. I love the way that things click, and I bought a keyboard that has that same clicking sound on it that I plug in and use, and I can really make that thing sing sometimes. I have a lot of fun with it.
This is wonderful. This is pure gold. I'm enjoying this so much. This is very cinematic. The pacing is wonderful. I will say the second half of the second act, when he's out at the stations and all that, there's a big event that happens out in nature, and boy, you really nailed that. So that makes a lot of sense.
I tell you what, that somebody asked me, uh, and that made me feel good because they must have thought it sounded so real. They asked me, was that an historical event or you just create that? I said, I created that in my demented little mind. And I just, something happened there, a cataclysmic event. And I thought, I can't just let it happen. I got to kind of explain how it happened. And I'm kind of really pleased with that story, that part of it.
Yeah, we're both doing a really good job of not giving anything away, but it was how one person who makes one decision affects a lot of people.
And that is true in life so much. I mean, so many of the decisions you made in your own life, and I do too, and how it affects everything on down beyond that. And I mean, like, not writing there 19 years, I'd have all those manuscripts, and it was stupid on my part, but you make choices, and sometimes you make good ones, but whichever way you go, it takes you down a road, and it can be good, it can be bad, and sometimes even the bad's good for you because it teaches you things, and just every little thing we make affects something else. It's like throwing a water in rock in the water. It just creates ripples that spread clear to shore.
Yeah, and the Western genre of all genres really amplifies that so well. So let's talk about Charles E. Lively. So let's talk about your nonfiction writing now for a little bit. So how did you come to find out about this man, Charles E. Lively?
I found out about him through a film called Mate One that was made by John Sayles. And
great film.
And I watched that, and they talked about Lively in there, and I got to look at him up a little bit. That film was very well done. It got a lot of things right about what happened, and that was May 19th, 1920, which was a couple days ago, was the anniversary of it. But what they did about Lively, they had the character exactly right. I mean, how they portrayed him, but he wasn't in Mate One that day. And I started studying on him, and I actually wrote a book, a fictionalized book on him. And then as I, put about 12 years of research into him, and the more and more I learned, I couldn't make up the story as good as his life really was. And he just, I researched, and fortunately they digitized a lot of newspapers from out west, and I was able to track him on a lot of things and acquire enough to write a book. But there's still things about that man I'm still trying to learn.
Wow. And you got to talk to some of his family members, you told me off.
Yes. Not too much. They weren't too keen on the idea of me doing a book on him. Now, he was mentioned in every book about the coal mine wars, but he actually has a daughter-in-law. As far as I know, she's still alive. And her two sons wasn't too enthused about me writing this book, and kind of cut me off a little bit from it. And my wife pretty much at the point now, it seems like every time I write a biography, somebody gets annoyed with me. And she says that she'd be happy if I never wrote another biography.
Wow. And they're protecting family members. What's the motivation behind the not supportive?
I think they thought I was sensationalizing him, but when I sat down to write this book, I really had no horse in that race. I didn't care whether he was a nice guy. I didn't care where he took care and adopted puppies. I really didn't care. And whatever I learned, I was going to tell. And my theory is, my dad was killed in a farming accident in 2018. But if somebody was going to write a story about my dad, the way I'd feel about it, as long as they tried to tell the truth about him, and good and bad, as long as I thought they were trying to be honest about him, I wouldn't care what they said. I mean, might be a little bit embarrassed about some of it, but Lively, I did everything I could. I didn't really get a lot of cooperation from them, and don't really want to go into some of the personal aspects too much. but they actually wanted to see the manuscript, and I gave the daughter-in-law access to manuscript before it went into publication. And yeah, and somebody's on there talking about biographies. You're wading into a lot of psychological baggage, and that's true. I mean, I understand that, and I can see how some of it would be embarrassing, but it was just a fascinating story, and it deserved to be told, and it added so much to all the information about the labor strife and coal mine wars in America, and so many of these things. I believe I thought he was just kind of an ancillary figure in the coal mine wars, but after writing and studying that much, I believe he's almost a central figure, and you need to somewhat understand him to understand everything else that happened around it.
Right. There you go. Can you, having lived in West Virginia for almost a decade, I learned a lot about this stuff. Can you, it's a very important time in American history with some very big players. Can you educate the audience a little bit about the coal mine wars?
Well, there was Paint Creek and Cabin Creek, West Virginia. This would have been about 1911, 1912, right in there. A bunch of miners went on strike, and they were pretty well the Baldwin Felts Detective Agency removed them from their company-owned housing, and basically the union provided them tents where they lived in. And at that time, the coal mine owners and Baldwin Felts Agency, and some of these coal miners, one of them was Rockefeller.
Yep.
And J.D. Rockefeller, and they created some. They mounted machine guns on a train they called the Bull Moose Special, and they drive by these tents and strafe the tents with machine gun fire. And okay, that was about 1912. The Paint Cabin Creek. Out in Colorado, in April 1914, the Baldwin Felts agents. William Baldwin, who was the president of the organization, him and Alan Pinkerton were good friends. And they're two detective agencies, and they kind of agreed that the Pinkertons would work west of the Mississippi and Baldwin Felts would work east of the Mississippi. But J.D. Rockefeller had already used Baldwin and the Baldwin Felts Detective Agency in West Virginia as holdings there. When he acquired coal mine holdings out in Colorado, he'd already used them, and so he used Baldwin Felts out there as well. And and the machine guns that were used on the Bull Moose Special train, they were put out in Colorado, transferred out there, and in Ludlow, Colorado, they were in tents out there, and they attached these machine guns to this car, steel-plated car. And they drive by and shoot the tents there too. And two of the same agents, Albert Felts and I believe a man named Ferguson, they were killed at Matewan in May 19th, 1920. And the same guns were used in West Virginia and Colorado, and some of the same people had used them. And John D. Rockefeller was involved in all that. Lively wound up killing a man out there in April 1914, and probably was targeted, this striking miner in the saloon. And he spent the next 16 months in Walsenburg prison with the most corrupt sheriff in Colorado history, a guy named Jeff Farr. And they kept him in jail without a trial. Albert Felts made sure he didn't get out. So he would take jailed miners, pump them for information, give it to Sheriff Farr, and he would take it back to J.D. Rockefeller. And
wow.
And he committed this killing 8 days before the Ludlow massacre, where some of the militia out there actually set fire to the tents. And a bunch of the people, to get away from the gunfire, had dug pits underneath them and covered them over with lumber. When the tents were set fire, a whole bunch of women and children died. It was the fixed. That's essentially the Ludlow massacre that occurred in April 1914.
Wow. See, thank you for sharing that, and all the more reason to read this book, folks, because this is our history. This is where we come from, and this was what was going on. I learned RG, the years that I spent in West Virginia really extended my worldview, deepened my worldview. Yeah,
It
West
gets in your
Virginia.
DNA.
Yeah, it does. Yeah,
West Virginia has that type of thing. And really, what started me down this path was, of course, everybody knows about the Hatfields and McCoys, and actually the series that Kevin Costner did, the Hatfields and McCoys, I watched it, and I thought, as interesting and as educational as it was, to me, it wasn't the most interesting thing that happened in West Virginia history. And it got such big ratings, of course, that would have been what, the May 19th, 1920, when 7 Baldwin Felts agents, 2 civilians, and the mayor died in Matewan, West Virginia on May 19th, 1920. And I've all long said, if that had happened anywhere west of the Mississippi, OK Corral had just been a footnote in American history. It was that big a thing. And I thought if they ever did another history to get high ratings, they might do it on what happened there. And that's when I penned that first book about Matewan. Yeah. And it should be back in print, I think, sometime next year.
Oh, good. Okay, let me know, because I definitely want to read that. So you mentioned you've written other biographies. So tell us about some of your other biography.
Well, you might see this WV on my shirt. I'm a huge West Virginia football and basketball fan. And Dad and I, while he's still alive, used to go to a lot of games. And we saw games. Actually, I love Major Harris, who quarterbacked in 1987, 88, and 89 for them. And Major Harris was kind of an early, they've got a lot of them now, quarterbacks that play like he did, that can run and throw and do that. But back in those days, the NFL was just sort of a drop back 3 steps and throw, big, tall, white guy passing. And I don't think the NFL was quite ready for the transition to people, the running, scrambling quarterbacks like Major Harris. And I liked him, admired him at the time, and I wrote his biography as well.
Did you have cooperation from him on that? Or?
Yes. Yeah, we had several visits and a lot of phone conversations. When it came down to publishing the book, we had some problems. I mean, I had that book ready the year he was nominated to College Football Hall of Fame. And I mean, it was ready to go. It was the best timing I ever had in my life. And then for whatever reason, Major started moving the goalpost on me. And we let that whole news cycle that was about the Hall of Fame and let that all pass without that book ever getting out. And he kind of changed his mind about it somewhere through that. And it kind of, another bad thing when I write a biography, for some reason, it just seemed like it never quite works the way I figure it's going to.
Yeah, I have, so I can't speak much about them at all, but I've ghostwritten 2 autobiographies. And yeah, there's like this self-doubt. You get a lot of phone calls in the middle of the night. Oh, maybe that shouldn't be in there. Or maybe I come across too, or that guy that I talk about. Yeah, it's a whole different breed of animal. That's why
I have really bad. My timing looks perfect with those those biographies, but I have such bad luck. I mean, that May 19th, 1920, I had this book ready right in the 100th anniversary of the Matewan massacre. That's COVID year. Yeah. And nobody can go anywhere. I mean, that thing, and those events, the shootout on the courthouse steps in Welch was August 1st, 1921. So that's 100 years too. And we're still in that COVID window. And one of my best time, there's another time where I have great timing, but really bad luck. And I've just never been as successful with those books as I always thought I should have been. And just bad luck.
I hear you. And a lot more, oh geez, I am so sorry. Variables with that. Yeah. Because you got living humans and all kinds of opinions. Yeah. I do the Chicago work where I play living history people, and I always wonder, you know, does the family get wind of it? What do they think of it? The choices you make, because you try to, like you said, you try to show, as long as the truth, what's appealing is the complexity of
Yes.
that. People aren't just all good, you know, and they have these fulcrum moments that are interesting. So, let's get to your next work, which is coming out later this year, which you described as a vast departure from what readers are used to. So how much can you tell us about this?
Okay, this is another book. I've had an idea for several years. As I said, I worked in a chemical plant. I've had this idea almost 5 years ago, and I wanted to write a modern day Western mystery. And you know, Craig Johnson with the Longmire thing already had the sheriffs out west, and C.J. Box with his characters. I can't think of his name; it's slipping me right now. But he did the game warden that's investigator in these mysteries, and it just come down to what can I write about? I mean, what can I make a mystery from? And finally, you know, you always hear in these writers conferences, they always tell you write what you know. So I thought, okay, how about a guy that works in a chemical plant that writes westerns on the side? And I just wrote what I knew, and I worked in a chemical plant, and I decided to pen this book. I had an idea about a lot of it. A lot of this book's very personal. I mean, not every bit of it's true to my life, but portions of it are. And I just had great fun with this thing, and I started writing it and used a little bit of my chemical background. And the book's actually called Bad Chemistry: Trouble in Tucson. And and what was interesting, most interesting about it, is I had just penned that book, and I sent it off to publisher, and here we were going through all the stuff with Savannah and Nancy Guthrie out in Tucson, Arizona. They're talking about Pima County and all that stuff happening out there, and that's where so much of this book takes place. And I'm just hearing it, and I'm thinking, boy, I hope I get this book out this year, because so much of it's going to sound familiar. And I incorporated a lot of today's social media stuff that happens, and how people get to be you know, media stars in a day or something. And I just had the most fun with this book. I probably pretty well wrote this in about 2 months, which is, I could probably do a Western probably 3 to 6 months most of the time. But this is when I know it's really going good. When I go to bed at night, and I can't wait to get up in the morning for that clock to go off, and me getting here in my office. Things were really going good at that time, and I was doing it every day. And I know I don't really set goals, but I know a lot of people try to get 1,500 words. Well, I had a few days I was getting 2,500, and
Nice.
and I felt like they were pretty good words I was turning out. I'm really happy with this book, and I kind of want to see how my readers react to it.
Yeah, that's neat. My most recent novel, I had occasion to fictionalize some people that I knew, because it's oh well, you're down in Southwest, so it's about Point Pleasant, West Virginia.
Okay, cool. Yeah, it now I actually moved the plant where I actually worked at, and a lot of what I'm describing, I kind of move it around, and I change some names and stuff, so I don't make a lot of things too evident. But you know, the book and the plan itself is going to be in West Virginia, and and I worked so long in West Virginia too, and just so I centered around, probably mostly about, it operates around Wood County, Parkersburg, West Virginia.
Oh, nice. Yeah, I incorporate Parkersburg, and I love Parkersburg, and I have a Rockefeller-esque family who's out of
Okay.
Parkersburg. But that's fun. I know. So kind of fictionalizing yourself. I I don't know if I was proud of myself, but I really showed myself warts and all. So when I when I get too excited and to interrupt people, or my skepticism of people, I put that all in there. So my wife shoots me a lot of looks across the table,
Yeah.
and it was actually kind of fun to take an honest look at myself. Did you go that kind of way
Yes,
too?
and that one too I wrote in the first person. And another thing about first person, and I think I put some of my warts in there. I can I think I annoy the character I'm writing there kind of annoys people sometimes, and I've found out that I can annoy people. And if you want proof of that, just talk to my wife for about 10 minutes. You'll get that. but I had a lot of fun with that. It's kind of tough. That's another thing about first person is try to make somebody believable and still make them a good character, but still kind of show some of their warts and all at the same time. And that's kind of difficult to do if
Yeah.
you do it well.
Yeah, exactly right. So I really enjoyed talking shop with you. So we got about another 10 minutes to go. Do you do much outlining? Like how give us an idea, and again for the readers, the aspiring writers out there who want to just do a better job. How much research, then outlining, sort of planning, and then the writing process? Take
I
us through
do
that.
I do kind of research as I write. I get to somewhere outlining. Uh, in school, I probably learned a lot of grammar this way, but they used to make us outline sentences in English classes.
Yeah,
I despised it. And I
me
don't
too.
think I've ever got over that word outline. I'm repulsed by it. I don't ever do outlines. Now I know in the writers community, they talk about there's outliners and there's pantsers, and they call us pants. They say, well, we're flying by the seat of our pants when we write. But I said, well, you guys are kind of flying by the seat of your pants when you do your outline too. And
Yeah.
and so I've always taken the attitude, look, my characters don't know what's going to happen in their lives. And sometimes I just write. I don't know exactly where it's going to go. I may have a and destination in mind of where this might turn out, but sometimes the characters can make me vary from that, and it happened a lot in Destiny to Ride Alone. But and a lot of things changed in this book that's coming out. Bad Chemistry. I changed that completely with that book. Where that book actually ends, I changed that. And I'll tell you what, I am. It's talking about first person there a minute ago. When you create a character that people love and care about, maybe cry when they lose somebody. I noticed in the series 1923 that was on recently, Taylor Sheridan, Alexander and Spencer Dutton, he killed her off, and people were just fuming mad about that. And they say that he ruined it. He could have went on 2 or 3 years, and I thought it's brilliant writing. When you create characters that people get mad about or sad about or weep over, you created a magic that just is unbelievable. And if you can do that, you've really done something special. When you capture that magic and you bring it to the printed page or the screen, or even you as an actor, do that. To me, that's just kind of magic. And when you think you've done that, it's quite a feeling inside.
I agree. In my fantasy series, I try to kill off one major character per book, and it's interesting when someone writes and says, "Oh, I was reading your novel on a flight, and I'm weeping in the seat, and people are looking at me like I'm crazy." And I'm going, "Wow, that's good." I figure if I cry when I'm writing it, that's a pretty good sign,
Yeah,
so when that happens, but
yeah.
yeah.
It is something, and people may get mad at you, but the truth is, they didn't write it, and they like if Spencer Dutton and Alexander, if they had everything had come out happy, they'd lived happily ever after. Nobody would remember it nearly as good as they do that she died. I mean, to me, that's just you don't always have to kill somebody, but sometimes that makes a character awful memorable too.
Absolutely right. Well, so tell us, so I have on all of the media. your author Facebook page with the link there, so people can follow you there. All your books are, I would guess, are on Amazon and all the
Yes.
major. Right.
Yes.
Okay.
You can find them all there. And you can
Okay.
also go to my website, which is rgyoho.com.
Oh, good. Okay, we'll put that on there too. rgyoho.com. I'll add that right after the show. And you want to tell us just a little bit in a minute or two. I know you're heavily involved in Western Writers of America. So tell us a little bit about that organization.
I love that organization. They have a convention every year. They move it all around the country, and I've won some awards from them, and I've won some awards for service. I've been their spur chair that runs their spur contest, which means I have to, if I enter a book, I kind of got to recuse myself from that category. But we've got 16 categories, 3 judges in each category, and I have to line up all those judges and have to take results from them and compile them. I Nobody seems to want that job. I may be the only guy dumb enough to want it, and I enjoy it. I kind of embraced the insanity of it, but I love the Western Writers Organization. I've always been a homebody, but I will flat out tell you, wherever they meet, yeah, and I'm serious about this, it's the only place I feel at home away from home.
Wow, that's a big compliment. I knew that you were deeply involved. 16 categories. Wow, that's
Yeah,
amazing.
yeah.
Very cool. And every year you do that?
Yes, this will be.
Wow.
I'm starting in August 1st. I'm starting my 5th year at it, and
Wow.
I kind of enjoy it. It's kind of hectic at times, and it's a lot easier since I retired than it was for that year and a half while I was still working. But
Yeah.
I kind of really enjoy it.
Good. And you've had some big names win some awards.
Oh
So
yes,
you draw Viggo Mortensen's film, which I
yes.
adore, that he wrote and directed and starred in. Yeah.
And he came, fortunately, graced us by coming to the convention in Amarillo last year, and I got to meet him. He's a really nice guy. Of course, A. Martinez was there as well. He came
Wow.
with Craig Johnson, their friends, and so I've got to meet some pretty big people. I got to meet Robert Carradine years ago, the late Robert Carradine, and that was kind of neat.
Very cool. Well, thank you so much for your time.
Okay,
I
it's
look
great to
forward
be
to,
here.
yeah, I'm going to read more of your books, and also just say, I'm going to say a quick goodbye to the audience, and then I'll come say goodnight to you. All right, so that was awesome. So especially if you love westerns, and I totally apologize about my glasses. As you see, the arm broke, so I apologize if they pulled any focus tonight. And again, you ERT Radio folks, next week, I'll be back next Thursday, but I'm going away most of next week on some personal business. So I'm replaying Richard Haddams, which is coming off Facebook this Saturday. So it'll go right back on Facebook. If you haven't seen that, it seems like when I repost them, for some reason, they get a lot more traffic. So if you haven't seen that, that was very wonderful. Tanya and I are almost to the end of the 5th of 6 seasons of Grimm, which he wrote on for the first 2 years. So actually, when we're done here, we got 16 minutes left on the next to last episode of the 5th season. So anyway, when I come back, I'm going to have 2 artists who I've known for a very long time. My cousin Dan Madia, who's worked for Nickelodeon and Saturday Night Live and is a brilliant illustrator. So we're going to share some work. He's going to share his journey. If you know aspiring illustrators, graphic artists, definitely have them join in. I think the week before that actually is a guy that I met when I was in college. So a long time ago, over 30 years ago, Jim Smith, who often watches the show here and sometimes chimes in. And Jim draws Hollywood luminaries, female Hollywood luminaries, mostly like 90%, Ellen Burstyn and Barbara Streisand and on and on and on. And he's met a lot of these people. A lot of these women, and so he's going to tell us stories, share his artwork. I'll do a slideshow for both of these guys, and then I am on tour again. Cyrus Avery and Tanya's doing her art, and we're going to be away actually most of the summer, so I'll do some best of stuff and give you some of our guests. I'm going to repost Josh Stout and the second Pendentia. Man, we've had some terrific people on the show, and wasn't RG great as well? So thank you all. 50th episode of Every Day is a Story All Its Own. We're just going to keep going. Next month, the second edition of Every Day is a Story All Its Own handbook for actors, writers, and directors is coming out. So I'm excited about that. So I'll talk to you soon. Have a wonderful, wonderful Memorial Day weekend, all our viewers here in the States, and I'll see you in a couple of weeks.